Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us on our Mental Health Monday. Today we have Dr. Jessica Silsby, and she is a part of our community partner. She's the new clinical director at IVAT, so we welcome her with open arms. And today she'll be talking about youth mental health. So without further ado, Dr. Silsby.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Coming onto the team just a couple of months ago. And so I'm just going to roll right in and start with a bit of a passion of mine is serving youth in our community. And at IVAT, we have adults and youth. So this fits right in. So here's my contact info, also Jessica S. at ivatcenters.org in case anyone has any further questions or about what I do or about questions that spurred from this presentation, anything like that. If I can roll this PowerPoint forward. There we go. So I figured I would go over 30 minutes, just kind of like a little snapshot and hopefully a few takeaways that will help you in recognizing if there's a youth in your life or perhaps your family that might be struggling, and then a few things that you can do to support them and really be there, which to be fair, the what you can do piece works also with the youth that are not struggling. So first, I'll just talk a little bit about what youth mental health includes, some of the concerns we've seen, and then, like I said, how to recognize and some things you can do. So some of these might be kind of small, but I also don't think it's totally out of public awareness throughout this pandemic, how youth have been struggling in our community, how, to be fair, like anyone has been struggling in the society and around the globe since the pandemic. There's been a huge rise in mental health, mental illnesses in young people for the past 20 years, and really a big spike over the past like 8 to 10 years in youth suicides. A lot of these facts and figures are ages, youth, some of them are the younger kids, like 6 to 10, and then from like 10 to 18 age range, and a few young adults that spans across ethnicities and location across the United States. This little factlet sheet on the screen is I got from NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is a really great resource for all things mental health, especially as people, if you have loved ones who are have a mental health diagnosis or are struggling in some way. With all of these numbers, it kind of ends up being averages, and we also know that Black and Latina children were 14% likely than white children to receive treatment for depression. Also, LGBTQ plus youth from American Indian and Alaskan Native backgrounds were 2.5 times more likely to report suicide attempt in the same year compared to non-Native counterparts. And so, unfortunately, with a lot of things in our society, our mental health system is also a system. And so whatever these numbers are, there's a good chance that you can have, 2 to 5-fold increases if you're working with gender minority or ethnic minority, also gender minority, sexual orientation. And it ends up being their mental health issues end up being paralleled in with any other intersectionality. So there is an unfortunate compound effect that does take place as well. So, oh my gosh, sounds really devastating. So what is typical behavior, and how do I know if there's a behavior that's happening during adolescence that would lead to some of these statistics? Because if we are trying to find out where there is fault or illness or struggle happening, it is also find it helpful to know what is more along the lines of typical. That being said, also be sure that typical is like family appropriate and culture appropriate, generation appropriate. And so these are going to be kind of general. So for the first one, for example, so your teen, what is very common in adolescence, you may know or remember that there's more moody, there's a lot more mood swings, there's a lot more emotion in general that comes out during adolescence. So if you have a young person in your life who has always been kind of sassy, who maybe has had a lot of emotions or has been prone to more worry and anxiety, then having that increase a little bit in comparison into their adolescent years is probably not a case for concern. Still, to be there and to be with that young person as they're going through with it, while also recognizing that this is probably typical and within sort of like normal range of moodiness for that person. Some things that would be not typical that would lean into the causes for concern is if those emotions are really long lasting. If we're looking at something that is for days on end, where they can't get out of that, if their behavior ends up being quite risky, if they're kind of like, well, we'll kind of get into this too, of like defying some of the rules that are set at school or at home, kind of sneaking out at night, things like that, or maybe like throwing things or hitting or really being like verbally assaultive. Those are, you know, behaviors that come out of big emotions that are not typical. So things to kind of have a red flag alert about. Similar panic attacks and self-injurious behavior as well. Another thing that is typical, I'll go through some of these a little bit faster than that one, but so you have an idea of what is typical for that individual from when they were younger into their teen years, to be able to kind of differentiate a little bit. So during adolescence, people become a lot more concerned about their own body, and feel almost like being on stage, that the world is looking at them, that everyone can see all of the zits happening. And so to be very aware of a particular dress or a style, or if a hair is out of place, or just, you know, people noticing them in big ways is pretty common. And then if they have social withdrawal, perfectionism, changes in their hygiene or eating behavior, things that are like kind of above and beyond that kind of make you maybe question if things are okay. I think that little like spidey sense of this is more than just I'm concerned about, you know, my clothing with my peers. Those might be some things to inquire a little bit more about. Next one being distractible or wandering. So I think dawdling has been a term I've heard used as well. So just kind of like a little more flightiness, a little like less able to remember where did I place everything? What was it that I was told to do? So not that it's going to go back quite to like toddler years of really needing to be specific about the order of operations of what needs to be done when giving a request, but there maybe give a little bit greater birth of reminding during adolescence. That would be appropriate. If that distractibility gets so much that they're not able to get their homework done or their house chores or other regular duties, then that might be something to look at. If they're regularly late for different appointments or sports or school, things that they're involved in that church or in the community, wanting to really, you know, check in with that youth and know, is this, you know, is there something else kind of going on that's making it really tough? There's more frequent conflict in family during adolescence. Again, kind of think back to your own coming of age, and this is a time where the individual is really starting to think more on their own for themselves. That may or may not jive with family, or with siblings also. So having different disagreements, maybe having a little more butting heads, appropriate. If it gets into the place of where now there's physical or verbal aggression, is the teen trying to run away from home or even like kind of threatening that, that is a little outside, and to pay attention to that. Some others here, experimenting with substances, so alcohol, marijuana, other illicit drugs. Having there be some experimentation is not outside the norm. This does happen with teens. I think having just a very open and transparent, like, I get it, like this does happen, again, in whatever is like in your family appropriate way of having that conversation. If it gets into selling drugs, if this is a peer group that is their main activity, is using substances. These are some things that are not typical and can be areas of attention that are kind of tip you off to maybe there's more going on. Sensation seeking or feeling invulnerable. It's a little paradoxical when you think of kind of kids feeling like, oh, I'm on stage and like the world can see me. There is also this sense of, oh, well, that won't happen to me, right? Like, oh, well, these things, that happens on TV shows, or maybe that happens to my cousin or my neighbor, but like, there's something about me. There's like, I think some developmental psychologists talk about like your, forgetting the term, there's like your own fable, your personal fable. And this is very normal. This is developmentally age appropriate through adolescence. And so having there be a little bit more kind of rebellion in this area, very common. If those kind of like reaching outside the box and doing new things and kind of testing the limits in a way ends up leading to accidents repeatedly over and over again, that might be a flag. If there's some risk taking that could lead to injury, these are some things to pay attention to. Also, getting arrested or interaction with firearms, wanting to like be there and see, okay, what kind of resources, what else do we need here? Next here is stress about new schools. So entering middle school, kind of a big deal. Entering high school, also a big deal. If there's any kind of school changes in that time, I know there's like a whole host of reasons why people either move around or change schools for some kinds of reasons. And there's a lot of schools out there, as also I have a private practice in my other life. And there's all kinds of different ways and strategies of educating and of participating with peers and in school and all of that. And so any kind of like change there is sort of like change in workplace, right? So new school stress, very normal. If there's bullying, either if that youth is bullying other kids, or if they're on the receiving end of being harassed, of being bullied, if there's few peer connections, again, this is like a time in life where peers really play a much larger role. So if there are not as many peer connections, or if they're just refusing to go to school, also like not typical. And so kind of being able to check in and dive a little deeper on what might be going on there. Similar, I was talking a bit earlier, argumentative, having strong opinions and ideals. This is where they really get up on a soapbox and express their new ideas. This is actually a part of some of what I love about young people is they have so much passion, or they can have a lot of passion about things. And so knowing that that is the case, maybe they're a little more outspoken than they have been. It's okay. It's kind of like within limits. If they end up going so far that they're really opposing school rules within reason, maybe there's different ways to navigate and change those rules, and working within a system that maybe the system needs to change. But if they're really repeatedly getting into a lot of trouble with authority figures, at least being able to have support from parents, support from guardians, support from coaches and teachers and people that can really support them in speaking up without having it get them, creating more trouble than what's going on. These got a little bit smaller. Sorry about that. Sexual interest, kind of like drugs, there's going to be some experimentation. There might be some questioning on sexuality or on gender expression and identity. Adolescence really is a way of coming into your own humanness. And so all of that is going to be it's going to be typical. This is part of life during that time frame. Sexual promiscuity, having multiple partners, unsafe sex, getting pregnant or having someone else get pregnant. These are not typical. What probably should go on there are sexual assault, also not typical, and definitely areas of concern to pay attention to. Daily decision making gets more stressful. Fun fact, our National Geographic, I don't know, probably a decade ago now, came out with this great article. I should have linked it, but it's The Amazing Adolescent Brain or something like that. If you go Adolescent Brain National Geographic, should be able to find it. And they talked about a lot of the neurobiological changes that happen in the actual brain. And one of the major takeaways is that various scientists and behavioral psychologists thought most of the changes in our brain happens like 0 to 2, maybe 0 to 5. And that was like the biggest bit of activity going on in our brain. What we now know, and have known apparently for a decade now, is that actually during adolescence, the brain goes through a similar amount of effort and reorganizing. And so just as many connections are grown and expanded and trimmed and just changed around, very similar to the first 2 years of life. So if there is dawdling and distractibility, if there is difficulty making decisions where it's like, well, you were able to make this decision about, what band you wanted to be in last year, and now you're not even sure if you want to be in band or what instrument you want to play. The brain is handling a lot of things in addition to the hormonal changes of puberty itself. So here we are. This is typical. What's not typical is indecision that paralyzes the action. So like if your teen is really stuck in that and really is having a hard time kind of going back and forth, if they're maybe trying to be skillful and weighing pros and cons of what they might do, but in the end, a thing doesn't quite happen, then that can be some more cause for concern. Desire requesting privacy. So in line with becoming more of an independent individual human, we all like to have a certain level of privacy. And so this is kind of that period of growth in time where parents and caregivers are not as intimately involved with dressing and changing and things like that. And so it is appropriate for them to be asking for maybe more space or more privacy in the things that they're doing. If so far that it goes into either hiding things or lying, checking out, just completely isolating from family, that would be something to look at. That is not typical behavior. Next here is intense interest in social media and technology and anything with the screen, really, anything that gives them more communication. There's, could be a whole other talk on the influence of social media and tech throughout pandemic and the rise of social media and all of that. How to know is that, where is the red flag in that? If it's multiple hours, I've also seen some statistics on like the average being like 2 to 3 hours or something like that. But if it's, let's say that's like the only engagement that they have after school, if they are going on inappropriate websites, if they're revealing too much about themselves, where they live, what they're doing, that kind of thing, out on the internet. I think in this day and age, teens are a lot better, and young people in general are a lot more aware of what not to put out there on the internet, but there still happens. And also sexting, which is not appropriate for kids, for sure. Next one, messy room. So again, kind of going with that, brain is doing a lot of things, and cleanliness of one's personal space is not always on the top of their priority. If it gets to the point where there's rotten food there, if the dirty clothes have been on the ground for days and days and weeks, maybe, if they're not able to find the things that they need to be able to find, check in there. And the last one is later sleeping cycle. So adolescents do in fact need more sleep than like kind of going from elementary age into middle and high school, their bodies and brains really do need more sleep. So in a sense, that does make sense. And their cycle tends to shift a little bit. So they might be desiring to stay up a little bit later, have a hard time waking up in the morning. If they're awake all night, if they sleep most of the day, if they're missing school, or if they're being late to school, that is outside of the norm. And so you check in there. Cool. So how to be involved in all of this? I actually think that really just education and awareness about where to kind of not exactly draw a line, but just know generally what is expected or that you can anticipate from teens going through teen stuff is really incredibly helpful, because if you can recognize it, it's a lot easier to intervene than if it's like, well, I don't really know if this is normal. Like, especially if you grew up in a home where it wasn't very normal or helpful or healthy or effective communication in a whole host of ways, it can then be really hard to know, okay, well, what am I passing on? How am I parenting? And so I just think that these tips, going back, which I should say, these all come out of dialectical behavior therapy, which very briefly is a behavioral therapy that incorporates mindful awareness from kind of more a secular way of being present. And there's an adolescent program. So Alec Miller and Jill Rathis put together a program and a manual that talks about how parents and kids can improve their communication and ability to regulate their own emotions, and also within the family. And I do have that reference on the last page if anyone is interested. So, okay, great. I know all of this. Now what? One of the ways is being able to balance, okay, here are all of the typical things, but wait, I still need to be able to like set these limits that I have as a parent, as a caregiver. I got to keep these kids safe, even when they're older and they think that they can just do it all and it's all going to work out and be fine, which hopefully, and it probably will, but like, you know, there's still the needs of parents to have that, and also recognize that there might also be this growing desire and drive for independence, which is the ultimate goal. It's just kind of like a matter of pacing. So you think of finding the Goldilocks between being too strict and also not wanting to be too loose in setting limits and boundaries. Not being careful to not make too much of typical behaviors, and then not kind of taking it too light and easy if there are in fact some areas of concern. So you want to be able to dive into that. And kind of another area of thinking of this, of like, how quickly do you push them kind of to grow up? Like, you don't want to like force them to be independent, and then at the same time not wanting them to be dependent and stay within the family forever. That's a little bit of an extreme, but yeah, it's kind of finding that balance in there. Communicating openness. Kids don't always, like young kids, like under 10, don't always have the vocabulary to express all of the intricacies of what they're feeling and what they're going through. And so being able to be there and be present and show up, that you are trying to understand what they're going through and how they're feeling. As kids grow into adolescence, they are not the best at the time, mostly telling you thank you and I really appreciate you for all the things you do and being there for me. And this is okay. Also probably should go on that what is typical list of things. And they are listening. And so when you say, you know, you can always call me any time of the day when you're away from home. You can always come to me when you are struggling with something, and I am here for you, and I will hear what you have to say. I care for you and I love you. And just setting it there, they're listening, they will hear you, and they probably won't say anything back to that. Maybe they will. Maybe I should give them more credit, but regardless, it really is just continuing to leave that door open. So if there are those areas and stressors that come up and that teens are bombarded with, and and thoughts, things that they hear on social media and in the news and whatever else is going on, that they know that you're there for them. This next point, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next page. And you'll be able to see all of these too. I forwarded my slides to Dr. Rogers, so she'll be able to get those for you. And I suppose this is recorded, so you can always come back and look and take a screenshot. So there you go. On validation. So validation can always come from adults in the kid's life. So caregivers, teachers, therapists, like any older person is able to express validation and let the young person know that, hey, I get it. What you're saying makes sense. Even if maybe their behavior isn't so great, like, I get how you got there, you know? And then what goes really both ways, hopefully, is accurate expression. To the best that you can, clearly explain how it is that you're feeling. Letting them know that their actions do have an impact, or their emotions do have an impact on how you're feeling and how you're planning things. That counts. That's really great information for the teen to have. And then encouraging them to be really clear that you're also not a mind reader. And so for them to be able to share things and let you know if there's something that they're struggling with, or something they don't like or they do like, being able to be as specific as possible back and forth is going to really improve that communication and that openness. Connecting with providers early, I think, is also a tip, is key if there are those areas of concern. The reality right now is there's a lot of wait lists around. And so the first time that someone shares with you, a teen, a young person says, I think I want to talk to someone, or I think I'm struggling with this, you can always cancel the appointment later. And it's not always easy to get connected with someone who's a good fit. And so kind of just getting that ball rolling kind of at the onset of things. I forget if it was on the earlier slide around statistics, but one of those is that the average interaction from the onset of symptoms that are upsetting or concerning to an individual, the average length of time it takes to get that first therapy or psychiatry appointment is 10 years. 10 years from the first feelings of like, this doesn't feel good, to actually being in contact and having a session with a professional. So whatever that starts, I would love to see people being able to be more connected. I also understand there's probably a whole other conversation we could have about the barriers that exist there, but at least doing what you can when you hear things from your teen if they're struggling. And then the last bit, you probably have heard this through the pandemic, put your own oxygen mask on first. So the best way to help your young people is to care for yourself. It's going to be a lot easier for you to be there for them in their struggle when you have also attended to your own needs. And if you need break, if you need support, as adults, we have a little more leeway and flexibility to find that support than the teens. And so, and what better way to model all of the things that you are hoping that they do? So it's like, hey, let's turn off the screens, everybody as a family. This is the time, an hour before bedtime, 8 p.m., no more screens. Might be jarring for some people, but anyway, whatever it is, really being able to take care of yourself. Here is various levels of validation. So this was, a middle point in the last slide about how to show up. How do you express to another person that they make sense? How is it that you convey understanding of what another person is going through? Well, here are six pointers, 6 things that you can hopefully take away from this. The first is to just be present and be interested. So although this is more of a webinar style, so I can't actually see all of you, but hopefully you're still with me and you're still listening. And that's enough. You're already validating in that moment. And number 2, accurate reflection. This is another way that a person can communicate. It can sometimes feel a little bit like parroting, like if a person says, oh, I had a really hard day, and you say, yeah, you had a really hard day. It sounds a little like corny and very therapist-y and maybe even like superficial in the moment. And maybe you don't have to use the exact words, but in that moment when a person is struggling, it's like, wow, you actually listen to every single word to the point that you could recite that back. And that is correct. That is how I'm feeling. Third is guessing the feeling based on behavior. So if a person maybe didn't say they had a bad day at work, but maybe they're just you might look at them, see their head down, see their eyes closed, see their hand on their face, and maybe guess and say like, hey, are you feeling down? Are you feeling sad? Are you okay? Even if they opt to not share and say more, because again, teens don't always say everything, it can still be validating. Understand the behavior from history. So if a teen changed schools and they're having a hard time making friends and they come home and they say, I'm just beside myself, like no one likes me, and this feels hopeless. I hate school. I hate the world. Maybe we could have commentary on all of the extremes in that, but really, how can I understand that? Well, yeah, of course, like you just changed schools. You just started school. That's around the corner. That's understandable because you knew different people last year. You were in different classes. You had different teachers last year. And so that really makes a lot of sense that you'd be feeling lonely or frustrated or upset. Number 5 is normalizing. So kind of similar to number 4, you can use history in this. Certain emotional reactions really come across the board, are normal for most people. So when we lose something, we feel sad. If we have an expectation that's put out there and we don't meet it, expectations versus realities go down, like we're going to be disappointed. We're going to feel sadness. And so if they say, you know, I worked really hard on this science project and I just feel like a failure, like I didn't get an A like I had hoped that I would, and I put so much time and effort into it. Wow, yeah, I'd be really disappointed too. I think most people, if they put that much effort into that, would be super sad. And number 6 is radical genuineness. Teens, kids have a fantastic radar of knowing if you're authentic. They are like our little authenticity radars, and they're so good at it that if at the end of the day, you really have no idea why they're so upset, they maybe haven't given very much information about why it is that they are in a mood, but they clearly are. You show up and you can say that. You can be like, wow, I'm not even really sure what to say here. Like, this seems just like a lot is going on, and help me understand. And if you, in whatever way that is genuine for you to show up and to be present with that kiddo, that's probably going to go over. You'll probably do all right, at least as a starting point. And my final thought in validation is to remember that it's on the receiving end. And so although I might think something was very validating, that other individual might not. If I saw someone like this, I might think, oh, maybe they need a tissue, and I might hand them a tissue. Maybe they take it and they throw it in my face and they're like, I'm not crying. I'm so mad right now. I'm furious. Totally legit. I might be wrong, and that is okay. And so it really is like you can gauge from the person that you're talking to, from the young person. And so they'll tell you if that fit. Also, this is the last, I think, slide of content here. And this is some more good news. So there are some positive indicators that this was a pre-pandemic study. So time will tell how they're faring through that. But from 2016 to 2019, that most children across the board did express these positive mental health qualities. So resilience, persistence, curiosity, affection in the younger kiddos, having a sense of self-control or viewing it, because this was parents reporting this. And so a lot of these things can, again, can kind of guard against the stressors of the world, and being able to show up and to use these factors in order to improve their day, maintain the social relationships, bounce back from some of the failures or the faults or the road bumps that they get along the way. Kids these days, I think, and also just like generally in society, there is more social awareness than ever before about mental health and about mental illness and how that's important. I mean, I'm just thinking of all of the actors and athletes and musicians that have come out and been really open about their identity, about their family, about their histories, about what they bring to the table, and being just their authentic selves showing up, I think can be really great role modeling. And then there's been some articles, there was one that was Anxiety and Depression Association of America. I might be getting that wrong. They came out with a blog post that highlighted a number of different youth kind of taking things into their own hand and learning more and diving into like intergenerational trauma and stressors and family patterns, and saying, you know what, like, let's band together and let's join coalitions. Let's connect as a community, as a group of peers in a whole host of ways that only they really know how to do. And so I think there is a lot of hope when we look at these young people, that they really are our future. So on that note, here are some references. Take a screenshot. Again, Dr. Rogers will pass this around.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was very informative, especially it was so timely because it's back to school month. And so for parents and guardians, they are going to hopefully be able to find this information very useful.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. It's some of the things that are like, well, how do I know what's out of the ordinary if I don't know what is ordinary?
Exactly.
Like, well, but here's a start.
Exactly. So I know we're about out of time today, but if you have any questions specifically for Dr. Silsby, there is her email address. Be sure to follow up. Or if you have any other general questions, you can always email the church at pekgsuame@gmail.com. Thank you so much and have an awesome